The scorching sun stretched across the vast Montana sky like a golden sheet, pouring fire over the endless plains where the wind rolled low and warm, through seas of dry grass, and every creature seemed to pause in respect for the silence, held by the largest ranch for 100 miles, the Lancaster Range, owned by none other than Mason Lancaster, the man people whispered about as though he were carved from the same unforgiving earth he ruled, a man wealthy beyond measure, powerful beyond challenge, and stubborn beyond logic, who had recently announced, to the shock of every ranch hand and neighbor within riding distance, that he was seeking a young bride, someone obedient, polished, delicate, a girl who would give him airs and smile, quietly beside him like a well-trained porcelain doll, because that was how Mason imagined marriage should be, clean and controlled, like the rows of fences marking his land, perfectly measured and unbreakable, until the day the stagecoach rumbled into town, carrying a woman he had never ordered, a woman he would never have chosen, a woman who would set his entire world ablaze, Amara Doyle, curvy, fiery, sharp-tongued, and walking with the determined sway of someone who had survived storms far worse than the gossiping eyes of ranch folk who paused mid-step at the very sight of her, whispering, pointing, wondering why this bold stranger was headed toward the same man who demanded absolute control from everything in his orbit. And as she stepped down from the coach, brushing dust off her hips, hair tumbling in thick waves around her flushed face, Mason himself watched from the ranch gate, brows lowering, chest tightening, realizing in one long, stunned breath that the universe was about to punish him for thinking he could choose a bride like selecting a breed of horse, because what he saw was not a quiet girl, but a wildfire in human form, and before he could turn away, she lifted her chin, met his stare without blinking, and said in a voice strong enough to silence the wind itself, "You must be the man who thinks he can buy a woman like he buys cattle. Well, I'm not for sale, but I am here to change your life, whether you like it or not." And just like that, the ranch hands gasped, Mason's jaw clenched, and a war he never expected had begun, one between his iron will and her unstoppable spirit, but beneath the tension already crackling between them, beneath his annoyance at her defiance and her irritation at his arrogance, something else stirred, something neither of them wanted to name, something dangerous and magnetic, something that would drag them from confrontation into destiny. And as the first hour of their meeting unfolded into a series of stubborn exchanges, clashing tempers and unexpected sparks, the quiet land around the Lancaster ranch seemed to lean in, as though eager to witness the story that was about to shake its dust-filled silence. The battle of wills, the blooming attraction, the changes neither of them could control, and the truth slowly rising that sometimes the bride you don't choose is the one fate always intended. The night had barely lifted from the Montana sky when Mason Lancaster jolted awake, his breath ragged, his thoughts tangled with the memory of the curvy stranger who had stormed into his life like a desert thunder. And as he sat on the edge of his bed staring at the first streaks of pale gold seeping across the horizon, he realized with an unsettling mix of irritation and fascination that Amara Doyle had not only challenged him the previous day, she had unraveled him, pushed him, stripped away layers he didn't even know he had. And now, as the ranch buzzed awake with the sound of boots, crunching gravel and horses snorting in their stalls, he felt a tension twisting inside him like a rope pulled too tight, because she was somewhere on his land, breathing the same cold morning air, preparing to face him again with that infuriating confidence. And sure enough, when he stepped out into the crisp dawn, there she was, standing near the main corral, hair tousled by the breeze, curves wrapped in a modest but form-fitting dress that made the ranch hands mutter under their breath, though no one dared approach her after witnessing her fiery spirit the day before. And Mason found himself walking toward her despite every reasonable thought screaming that he should keep his distance. Yet Amara turned before he even spoke, as though she could sense his presence, and said with piercing calm, "If you're here to tell me to leave, save your breath. I've slept under worse roofs than yours, but I won't run just because the great Mason Lancaster can't handle a woman he didn't pick from a catalogue." And the way she said it, unapologetic, steady, sent heat flooding through him. Half anger, half admiration, stirring something primal he hadn't felt in years. But Mason refused to let her see the effect she had on him, so he folded his arms, narrowed his eyes, and replied, "You're on my land, eating my food, sleeping under my roof, so yes, I expect some respect," to which she stepped closer, unflinching, her gaze blazing with challenge, and whispered, "Respect is earned, rancher, not bought," and the silence that followed crackled like lightning ready to strike, drawing the attention of every worker nearby who sensed that something monumental was building between these two stubborn souls, something bigger than pride or temper, something that felt like the beginning of destiny, pulling them toward a collision neither could escape. And as the sun climbed higher, casting molten gold across the ranch, Mason found himself reluctantly offering her a role on the property, partly to keep her close where he could watch her, partly because something deep inside whispered that pushing her away would be the greatest mistake of his life. So he led her toward the barn, explaining the tasks, the expectations, the rules, and Amara listened with raised brows and half-hidden amusement, clearly aware that the mighty rancher was trying to assert dominance even as he struggled to ignore the way her presence disrupted the careful order he built his life upon. And as hours passed and they worked side by side, bickering, challenging, and unexpectedly softening, the ranch hands exchanged knowing glances, whispers traveling like wildfire that Mason Lancaster, the man who thought he wanted a quiet young bride, had instead found a woman who matched him flame for flame. And though neither Mason nor Amara dared admit it aloud, the truth was growing rapidly between them. That control was slipping from his grasp, that freedom was blooming in hers, and that destiny had bound them in ways neither could undo, no matter how hard they tried. Like, comment, and share. Subscribe our YouTube channel